Welcome to the Heroic Minds podcast, where we uncover the heroic stories of individuals battling through adversity and rising to the top of professional sport, business, and life, uncovering the characteristics, the secrets, the tactics to become the hero of your own story, because it is adversity that maximizes human potential. Welcome back to the Heroic Minds podcast. On today's episode, the guest is actually myself. Why I'm doing this today is I want to bring to light something that I believe is missing in the concussion, head injury, and sport conversation. Something that's been missing for a long time, and I've been waiting for it to come out, and it's just not in the conversation. It's not in the news. It's not in the people that have the microphone and the ability to bring it up aren't bringing it up. And I don't know why that is, because it is so important, and it's something that gave me the ability to move on from sport. It gave me the ability to overcome the issue of head injuries in sport. It empowered me in such a way that I look back and I'm as happy as I could ever be, even though I'm not playing a sport that I thought defined me. I'm not playing hockey at a professional level, which was my biggest fear. Me not doing that was literally my biggest fear growing up. So a little background on myself before I get into this. Grew up playing hockey, soccer. Once I got to the age where hockey would provide a few more opportunities, I put all my eggs in the hockey basket and again thought I was going to end up an NHL hockey player one day. I truly thought that was going to be where I ended up. So I was lucky enough to be drafted to the Kitchener Rangers as a 16-year-old. For those that might not know, it's a stepping stone to pro hockey, this league, right? Or it is for many, and for others it's a stepping stone, just part of life, and then they go to school, get a degree. But for those that don't know, so I step into the OHL, which at this point I think is a stepping stone to the next level, which is professional hockey. I didn't have anything to complain about. Going to school with my teammates, still my best friends today. I was leaving school halfway through to go practice, play a game of hockey that I loved. So I didn't have much to complain about. I'm 16 years old, and I don't remember a week and a half here of time, but telling the story from my point of view, I'm playing a game in Brampton. I get on the bus, and then I wake up in the hospital. When I wake up in the hospital, the doctor says to me, "Ben, do you know why you're here?" I'm shaking my limbs, trying to figure out what happened. What did I break? What hurts? Nothing hurt. But I started to cry because I had no idea where I was, how I had gotten there. And so before my mom could chime in and tell me what had happened, the doctor said, "Ben, after the game that you remember, the following night," and I wasn't hurt at this point, I just don't remember. I don't remember the full night home, pregame, meal, etc. Said that you were hit behind your net, your helmet fell off, fell off, your head hit the metal stanchion that holds the glass in place, and you fell to the ice. You were taken here in a helicopter. And then he went on to say that sports were out of the question for the rest of my life. He said that I would need a teaching assistant if I wanted to go back to school. He said that I may be a different person than I was the first 16 years of my life. And to conclude, said that they'd have to keep me at the hospital for the next little while because my brain was bleeding in 3 different places, and they were going to have to see if I needed brain surgery. So that was insane to wake up to after thinking I was on my way to the NHL. I'll keep things moving quickly with this story. So I'm in the hospital for 7 days. On the last day, the doctor comes in the room and says, "Ben, we're going to do one more CAT scan and MRI and see how things look. And if things have cleared up, you're going to be able to head home here today. If they haven't cleared up, we're going to have to do brain surgery." And so he left the room. Team of nurses came in and started gluing beads on my head of where the surgery may take place. So time goes by. I've got tears in my eyes. My mom's got tears in my eyes. My dad, firefighter, 25 years, didn't like seeing me hurt. So he said he was going to go start the car and pull it up front so that when we got the good news, he'd be there and we wouldn't have to wait for the car. I don't know where he got that optimism from at that time, but so doctor walks in after what I felt like 4 hours and said, "Ben, we're not able to explain how you've healed the way you have, but you're going to be able to head home here today." And so again, for the sake of the time on this podcast, we'll say I took 2 years off. And when we left that hospital, we had the plan to have a follow-up MRI. I mean, there were other doctor's appointments in between, but a follow-up MRI 2 years later to see where I was, just from a health point of view. But for some reason, over those 2 years that I wasn't playing, I moved back with the team. I could go into tons of details, but moved back with the team and was doing a bunch of things, got into some triathlon stuff actually. Slowly pushed the envelope and doctors gave me the green light to do some triathlon stuff. So anyways, I end up at this appointment 2 years later, and they say that if I wanted to play hockey again, I would have the ability to do so. So 2 years away from the game, while playing, I was still around the team, and I returned to play. Finished 3 more years with the Kitchener Rangers, was lucky enough to be the captain my last year, which was a very humbling and incredible opportunity. I was lucky enough to go to camp with the New York Rangers, was lucky to start speaking at schools about concussion, and all these great things came into my life. And then it came to the point where I had to decide, am I going to continue to play this game and play professionally, or try to, or am I going to accept the biggest fear in my life and stop playing? And how the heck would I even do that? And where would I start? And who would I be? And that's what leads me to, I believe, the missing piece in this concussion conversation of how do we get players to be willing to sit out with the risk of never playing again, or just to accept the fact that they may need to stop playing. It's missing in the concussion conversation right now. I know it is, because with my experience, I'm a part of, or I try to be a part of all these. I follow everything on Twitter. I follow things on social media. My ears perk up when the word concussion or head injury in sport comes up. And for some reason, the topic that I'm about to explain and dive into on this podcast or this episode, it's missing. And I feel like it's a role of mine or a duty to speak up and say something. And that's what this episode's all about. Before we get going, I always give a little shout out to one of my new favorite companies, True Local. They are an unbelievable company. They send me individually packaged meats in a box right to my doorstep. And it's really neat, actually. You can order whatever you want online, click ship. You can get it whenever you want. You can get it once a month. You can get it twice a month. You can get it once every month in 24 days. It's totally up to you. And the meat shows up right to your door. And it's high quality meat, locally sourced. So it's hard to go back to regular meat once you try this stuff, I warn you. So check them out, truelocal.ca, trulocal.ca. And use my discount code HeroicMinds25, all capital letters, to get $25 off a regular size box. I thought that I should share a message that I haven't shared yet, and it's in regards to this conversation of concussion and the issues revolving around head injury in sport. And this could even revolve around other injuries in sport. It could revolve around moving on from something. But I feel there's something not being talked about in the conversation of concussion, from the league down to the everyday conversation in a change room, everywhere. This concussion conversation is missing something massive, and I'm confused as to why that is. And looking over this issue that I see and comparing it to my own personal story, and also the story of many other guests on this podcast, and the things that I've learned and applied to my life from this podcast, are what has led me to figure out exactly what needs to be said in this concussion conversation. And to me, put simply, it's that athletes need to be tougher. And you may think right out of the gates, what does he mean by that? That athletes are expected to be tougher and play through these concussions? And actually, no, it's quite the opposite. So before I dig into this, my definition of toughness. From sitting down with 34 incredible people, I think every episode relates to this, but I'm going to pick out a few specifically. Nick Nezik in episode 2, his second time through cancer, and just talking about being on that table right before surgery where they had to cut from his waist right up into his chest, remove the organs from his body and get the cancer out of his body. And talking about at that moment that there was nothing else he could do. He had to accept the position he was in. Amber Schufeld, Living Life with Cystic Fibrosis in episode 4. I mean, the title of the episode was Accept What You Can't Control. And she talked about how when she accepted that she had CF, when she accepted it and then approached it and learned everything she could about it, that's how she was going to prolong her time on this earth. And that's what she's doing today and living a triumphant life. Brett McLean, supposed to be an all-star in the NHL, started off his career in the NHL, had a heart attack, and he can't play the game anymore. Has accepted that situation and now moved on to a bunch of other incredible things. Episode 9, Ryan Martin, Living Life with Bipolar Disorder, just biked across Canada. And the title of that episode was Acceptance Breeds Resilience. And he said up until the point where he accepted that he had bipolar disorder, because he avoided it and said, no, there's no way I have that for years. Once he accepted it, I mean, again, he just finished biking across Canada. Daniel Gallucci in episode 19, going through brain cancer and just talking about how we're not that different from the shrimp at the bottom of the ocean, yet we have this idea that we deserve more. And we shouldn't deserve, crappy situations. We deserve more all the time. We deserve nicer cars, et cetera, et cetera. And then when we don't get that, there's this stress. Another example, above knee amputee firefighter, ex-hockey player, unbelievable, outstanding individual, Mike Laughlin. And he just says now that he has a prosthetic leg and he's a full-time firefighter, it's just his new normal. It's his new normal with things. Life's a little different than it used to be. But again, he's accepted that new normal. And now he does everything that someone with 2 human legs would do. Another example, I mean, the list goes on, and I know I'm getting carried away here. Last example here would be Chris Miranda, who has Guillain-Barré syndrome, ex-pro golfer, and lost the use of his hands and feet. We talked through that, and he just said he's found a greater purpose now. Does he do things the same way he used to? No, he doesn't. But he's put himself out there and accepted the situation, so now he still can teach his son how to play hockey, how to play catch, how to hit the golf ball. Does he do it the same way as every other father would? No. But he's found a way to do it, and he's found a greater purpose in doing so. And he went on to explain how someone else was going through Guillain-Barré at a young age, and they didn't actually know, and he told them to go to the hospital, and now that person was able to have full function of all limbs of their body. They're living a life just like people with an able-bodied would. And he, that might not have happened if Chris didn't go through what he went through to then help someone else. So that's just another example. So to me, getting back to this idea of toughness, I know I ventured out there a little bit, back to this idea of toughness. Toughness, I now see, and I'm sure there are other definitions of it, but toughness for me, from sitting down with all these incredible individuals, is being able to accept where you are at any moment. To explain myself further, if you're able to accept how much money you make, come to terms with that. If you're able to accept the car you drive, the job you have, what you feel like right now, whether that's happy, sad, tired, etc. But being able to do this, accept where we are at any moment, regardless of the situation, especially today with social media, with all the overstimulation that we always hear about, I know that's no secret or no new concept. It's hard as it's ever been to accept where you are. How do we accept the car we drive when we see all over social media other people apparently driving nicer vehicles? And you can use that example for anything. Someone appears as if they're living a life without worry and a lavish life, which, again, things just may appear that way. So we have to accept where we are. And to me, that is true toughness. It's almost the idea of having more with less. Accepting that you have less than someone else, yet really in your mind, you have more. Because you don't need all those extra things to get to the same mental standpoint as someone else. So anyways, to me, that's the definition of toughness, being able to accept where you are at any moment. And going into that, one more thing before I hop into this comparison to the concussion issue, is that we have a story in our mind. And now I'm going to start relating things to my story. We have a story in our mind of where we would like to be, the ideals. That's how we set goals. Every day we wake up, we don't just think about where we are in the present moment. We have to plan for the future. That's natural. So we have a story in our mind. When we get up, this is what I foresee myself doing today. And that could be a week down the road, a month down the road. We even have thoughts of where we'd like to see ourselves a year or two down the road, maybe even 10 years. So this can, again, you can relate this to any part of your life, but I'm going to keep it in context to concussion. So me personally, in my mind, my story was, in my mind that I was going to be in the NHL one day. That was my story growing up. From 7 years old, probably, maybe 8 years old. And then I get to 16 years old, and that's still the story in my mind, but there's a space in between that story in my mind and where I actually am in life. And going off topic a little, that space in between is where depression, anxiety, worry, and fear can come into play. But that's a discussion for another time. So anyways, as an athlete, we have this story in our mind of where we're going to end up. And I'd say majority that are putting tons of time and effort into that sport have a story in their mind of where they're going to end up one day, professional athlete. And for me, it was a professional hockey player in the NHL. Everything I did was revolving around that story in my mind. But I wasn't actually there yet. So what we do then, naturally, is we do things to bring ourselves closer to that story we have in our mind. Through my time as a young hockey player, and this is no fault of anyone along the way, hockey has given me unbelievable things. But in the hockey world, in the athletic world, as you edge closer to that sport, it is looked at as weak if you spend your time doing things other than participating in that sport. So if we decide to get into whatever, another hobby, another sport, and it's taking time away from 100% focus on your main sport, the one you hope to play professionally one day, it's looked at as weak. So we now have all these athletes with 20 eggs to put into different baskets, and 19 of them go into their sport basket. And we're going to stick with hockey here. So I put 19 eggs in that hockey basket. And yes, my parents had me doing tons of other things. Public speaking, school was a massive part of my life. I wasn't allowed to play junior hockey if I wasn't going to university. So that's not a part of this. But in my mind, I was solely doing everything revolving around sport to, again, bring myself closer to that story in my mind. But during that time, there was no conversation about hockey might be taken from you one day. And the ironic thing is my mom always used to tell me, my mom said, you could lose this opportunity at any moment. You're one injury away, she used to say. And I was so naive and had such a big ego at that point that, you let stuff, water off a duck's back. Okay, yeah, for sure. But I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there. That injury stuff isn't going to happen to me, right? I'm going to get there. I'm going to get to the NHL. So my mom always said that. And she actually didn't like hockey from day one because of she used to call it the violence of the game. So she always used to say, that game could be taken from you at any moment. But besides my mother telling me that, within the sporting world, that wasn't really a conversation. There was no, what would you do if you stopped playing one day? Let's talk about that today as a team. What else do you do? What else do we all do here in this locker room? That never came up. So we have this concussion issue on our hands. And for some reason, people love to push blame on certain things. So and I'm not taking the power away from or the value of talking about rule changes or equipment changes, all that stuff. I'm sure that plays a role. I'm sure there's factors involved in that I don't totally understand. So I'm not going to comment and say if that's positive or negative. But yes, that stuff's part of the conversation. But what I see missing from the conversation is the fact that athletes should know that one day sport might be taken from them. Sport might not be a part of your life at a competitive level. And when that conversation happens for the first time, when you're in the doctor's office and there's an MRI in front of your face that you don't need a neuroscience degree to understand something's going wrong in it, that's not the best time to hear that. And then we sit and wonder why this issue continues to pile up. An athlete hears for the first time that they might have to live without sport when they're, in my example, 16, maybe it's 21, maybe it's 23, maybe it's younger. The first time shouldn't be in that situation. It should be a conversation that comes up well before that. Or it should be a conversation that comes up right now in the concussion conversation. We have so many unbelievable people ex-athletes, researchers, doctors, etc. Tons of them at the table right now. They have the mic. They've got thousands of people listening. They've got their attention. And for some reason, I don't see the topic of, hey, here's one thing we can do. It doesn't take a neuroscience degree. It doesn't take any specialty. It takes one person, and then two, and then three, and then four, and people other than your mother or your father. Someone that influences you outside of the home telling you it's okay to move on. You have a concussion. You've had two maybe. It's okay to move on. And you know what? I'll show you a list of 40 or 50 other people that have moved on. And they're living a happy, healthy life. Maybe even happier than if they still were pushing and pursuing professional sport or sport at a younger level. Now, if that's part of the dialogue well before, if that's a potential concept or a realistic potential in that story we have preset in our minds, we'll be more likely as athletes to be able to accept it if the time comes. And so coming back to the story in your mind and the toughness idea, again, I said athletes need to be tougher. And what I mean by tougher is I mean supported. They need more support so that they can be tough. Because toughness is accepting that they may have to stop playing. We played through injury, and I say we because I'm speaking for all athletes. I wasn't quote unquote tough. I didn't have any fights my entire hockey career, so I'm not a big tough guy. But we played through injury from a young age. Whether you're a sprinter, whether you're a swimmer, you show up for practice, you're accountable, ownership, again, those great characteristics that do come from sport, but we're always told to play through injury. So that isn't toughness as much as it is habit. I even heard the other day talking separate idea about philosophy and pain and whatnot. And the idea that we've actually, as people, not even just athletes, found that we found comfort in pain. I mean, what is exercise, right? There's a benefit to it. So we're willing to take on immense amounts of pain for the benefits. It's no different in sport. You play through an injury that causes pain, but those benefits are, look at your team loving that you're out there playing through injury. The fans are loving that you're playing through that injury. So it's really not that tough. It's just a habit that we've built up over the years and years. But what we haven't built up as a habit is being able to say, oh, okay, I guess I got to pursue some other hobbies for a little bit till I recover. Or I have to find some other interests full time because I don't think it's safe for me to continue playing this sport. And for me personally, this concept, the Kitchener Rangers in my situation were absolutely incredible. Unbelievable, out of this world, incredible and supportive, and they were willing to keep my stall in the room my entire time there, even though if I wanted to just do stats or just be a part of the team in the office, even if I wasn't playing, their support was incredible. But there were two people my very last season. It was my head coach and my assistant coach, Troy Smith, who's now a head coach with the Saginaw Spirit in the OHL, and Mike Van Ryan, who's an assistant coach in the NHL with St. Louis right now. But they were my coaches when I was in my final year. They were the first two people that I told of my decision that I was going to move on from playing hockey, because I went through my injury. I took 2 years off. I returned to play. I was lucky enough to realize I had some pro opportunity. I went to camp with the New York Rangers. I was lucky enough to be the captain in my last year. So all these great things came of it, but I knew it might be time to move on from playing. My absolute biggest fear in life. When I wasn't playing, the 2 years I was off, I literally, and this is embarrassing, used to put my jersey on when I would go to bed because I wanted it so bad. I went back to a sport that almost took my life. That's how bad I wanted it. Looking back, it's crazy. Hindsight's 2020. I'm lucky that I took the time off, the right amount of time. I was given the green light to play again. Anyways, all these different things were going around in my mind. You know what I should tell the coaches? I'm ready to move on from playing because it's just the right thing to do. I need to get it out there so that I can't turn back on it. But you had that pro opportunity and you still have pro opportunity and you've worked so hard for this. And so a bunch of different things in my mind. Again, the biggest thing is that this was the biggest fear. What would I do? Who would I be? I wouldn't be a popular kid at school if I stopped playing. I wouldn't be cool anymore. And it's not that I didn't think I could do anything else. It was more the idea of who would I be if I was doing something else. I wouldn't be the same person. I felt like I would lose all my friends because I wasn't a hockey player. I would lose the bit of ego that I thought I had and the confidence. It felt like I was going to be a completely different person. So I had this mental conversation for pretty much from halfway through the season till when we had about 10 games left, and finally approached both my coaches. And the response they gave me is really the reason I'm recording this podcast. First, my assistant coach, Mike Van Ryan, said that, and if you look up his stats, amazing, successful NHL career, cut a little bit short due to a knee injury. So I knew at that point that he'd been through, being obligated out of the game or forced out of a sport that he loved to play. And he said, Fanel's, and shook his head and was talking as if this wasn't even a serious conversation, and said, Fanel's, you give it a couple of years, it'll be tough for the first little bit, but once you get over it, you get over that hump, he said, you're going to laugh at your old self thinking that hockey was everything. He said, there's nothing that makes me happier. Hockey could have made me 10 times happier, and it still wouldn't make me as happy as I am with the 2 kids I have right now and the family I have and the life I have. And he's a simple man. He loves to hunt and coach and motivate others, but it's not like he's living a lavish life or anything. He's quite humble. So when he said that, when I was able to hear someone that had been there speak up and say that it's not that bad to move on. It's not that bad to stop playing. Actually, he made it sound better. It actually got rid of worry and brought a lot of joy into his life, and he found new things he could do and he had more time for other things and hobbies. But it's one thing to hear it from your mother, who's always been telling you to slow down and take it easy and don't do this or don't do that and be safe. And it's another thing to hear it from someone that's been where you want to get to. Someone that has been there. He's been to the NHL and he's been successful. And here he is telling me that it's okay to move on. And then I leave that office and I walk down the hall to my head coach. And I said, Smitty, and kind of laughed after having the conversation with Rhino. I was hoping or assuming I would get the same kind of feedback. And he said that he thought I was still good enough to pursue pro hockey if I wanted. And said that that's a tough decision I was making. But he said, I think you'd have opportunity in pro hockey, but I totally understand where you're coming from. And I don't even know if he knew what that meant to me, the fact that I was a good hockey player. He put that in there, and I don't know if that was because he meant to or not, but he had said, you could, I believe you're good enough to play pro hockey. And I thought, but then he said he understands though. And that was almost an acknowledgement that, yeah, you're pretty good, but the right decision still needs to be made. And he went on to say he thought I was making a right decision, the tough decision. And he also started to tell me about when he moved on and when he spent his time at St. FX at university and the joys that brought into his life. And again, I'm telling 2 people that are my coaches. We still had 10 games left in the season, and I'm telling them that I'm ready to move on from this game that they've been supporting me through. And really, they want their players to go play pro. That's how it works, and then they look better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But here they are saying, it's okay. I understand. Here's what happened when I went through it. Again, no different than Rhino. I looked up to Smitty the same. And the fact that he had talked about when he finished playing and that it wasn't the end of the world. Having those realistic examples from people that are in the game, around the game, openly talking about when they moved on, when they finished playing. I'm telling you from the point of view of someone that was willing to go back to this sport, and a sport that almost ended my life. It's not like I kind of wanted it. My head coach at the time said, if you want this, you better be 110% sure, because it wouldn't be fair to yourself or everyone else in your life if you only wanted this 90% to play again. He said, you better be sure you want this 110%. And I said, I do. And I went back to play. So what I'm trying to say is that's the mindset I had. And these two individuals with all those running thoughts in my mind, should I stop playing? Should I not? Will I be a quitter? These two people were individuals I did not think would have that response. And their response specifically was the turning point for me. Gave me the ability to say, it's time to move on. And not only just accept it and be okay with it, to have that toughness that I talked about, accepting that, hey, your story is going to start to change now. You better change that story in your mind and start to accept it so that you don't live with this regret or this pain or fear or anxiety in your mind, which I did for a little. I didn't easily accept it. It didn't happen overnight. There was some time where I was in life compared to that story in my mind. There was a gap there filled with a little bit of anxiety. But they gave me the courage and ability and toughness to finally say, I'm not a pro hockey player. I'm not going to be a pro hockey player ever. But you know what? This just opened the doors to so many other things that I can tackle now. And that's literally exactly what I'm doing today. I mean, my peers think I'm crazy. My best friends, my family, my girlfriend. Oh, what project are you working on today? I'm chasing so many other things. I mean, I'm failing at a few of them. Finally finished my degree about a month ago. I'm working on this podcast that's slowly growing, and I've got a couple exciting ideas coming up on how I can grow this thing and continue impacting people's lives just through this podcast. I started a foundation that we're helping other people now going through head injuries and concussion. I've gotten into hiking, and I've gotten into so many other things I never thought I would get into. I'm not a bird of a lie. I've got a kombucha factory, it seems like, in my condo right now, because that's another thing I'm, fooling around with and experiencing. And these are things I thought were quote unquote probably lame back when I had tunnel vision on the game of hockey, back when I thought there was no way I would do anything other than play hockey for a living. But it took people that I looked up to, people in the game, saying it's okay to stop playing. That's what really inevitably empowered me and gave me this courage and toughness to finally accept it. And now I couldn't be happier with where I am. And what Rhino had said to me in the office is so true. I look back at myself thinking hockey was everything, and I laugh. And it's not anyone's specific fault. It's sport, it's culture, it's just is what it is. And I hate that saying because there's no context to it really, but unfortunately it is. That's just where we are as athletes. That's how things work out in life. So what I think needs to change in this conversation in concussion is that more people need to say it's okay to stop playing. It's okay if you're not the starting quarterback on a Friday night in front of 4,000 people. It's okay. And then we can reinforce this by saying, look at this person, look at this person, look at this person. They all moved on from the game at some point. Was it tough for them? Oh yeah, it was. But look where they are today. Look at how happy they are today. Look at the stories they have from the time they did play a little bit of sport. So to conclude, there are a lot of great things going on in this conversation of concussion. And I'm not downplaying all the other conversations and their topics of rules and equipment. Like I said, I'm not downplaying that. I'm sure there's a role there and an impact that those decisions will make that will lead things in the right direction to make athletes safer in all types of sport. I think that's important. But for some reason, I don't see this topic out there very much. And I think it's because the athletes themselves and the people around sport don't want to accept that situation. They don't want the accountability of, wow, you're right, we do need to start accepting that. Because it sucks. It's not easy. And you need a lot of people around you, and you need that support. And you need to sometimes venture out to get that support yourself. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this is an easy fix. This is really tough. And that's where I think it's true toughness in this conversation. To go back on the ice, go back on the field is a habit. But the more conversations we have, the more people open up that they moved on, The more people that say I took a year off, 2 years off, when I got back to playing, I wasn't quite the same. I took too much time off, but it was fun to finish up my career. But I took the right amount of time off to recover and heal to then go back and play. Or I took some time off and then actually figured out I didn't really want to play anymore. So I started doing some other things in life. So many situations, scenarios, and I think the more people share and open up, that'll make a huge impact in the concussion conversation. And I'm talking openly and as serious as I could ever be, in that it's the reason I've been able to move on. It's the reason I'm now doing so many, personally, I like to think, but I'm a little biased, why I'm doing so many exciting things now with my life. Athletes do need to be tougher, but that toughness doesn't come from people not speaking up. It doesn't come from playing through injury to the point that it's too late and then we regret certain things or decisions we've made. That true toughness that it takes, because it's habit to go back in, that true toughness it takes to take time off or to move on from that game completely comes from support, comes from people speaking, opening up. And then those individuals will hone that toughness. They'll have the ability to accept where they are and what comes with that, and make decisions that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to make. If they never heard they can survive without sport and enjoy life without sport, they'd have no idea. We're all in this together. Everyone plays a role in one individual's life, that athlete's life. We have an opportunity where it doesn't take a degree to help someone out. It doesn't take being in a position of power necessarily to help these individuals out. It just takes people opening up and sharing their stories and showing that, hey, it's okay. Trust me, it's okay. And just like Rhino said to me, in a couple of years or whenever you accept this and get over this situation, you're going to look back at your old self and laugh and think, I can't believe I thought hockey was everything. And boy, am I happy with where I am today. Thanks for listening.